Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of History You Didn't Know But Should. I'm Ray.
And I'm Chris.
And Chris, political violence has been part of the American story, as you know, from the very beginning. The revolution itself was born in violence, and the decades that followed saw deepening divisions throughout the nation, whether in the antebellum struggle over slavery, the bloodshed of the Civil War, or the turmoil of Reconstruction. The late 19th century brought violent clashes between workers and industry, while the early and mid 20th century witnessed both racial terrorism and anti Black violence. By the 1960s, political assassinations rocked the nation to its core. And against this backdrop, Chris, it's no surprise that presidents and others have often faced threats as well. And, Chris, we saw this week, unfortunately, a very graphic example of political violence and what happens when, I guess you could say, political hatred gets out of control.
And the unfortunate thing is that political violence has become too frequent
Oh.
in our society. You think about in 2025 alone, we have had individuals with, I think, a respective party in Minnesota, I think state legislature, who were shot. We had an individual set fire to the home of the governor of Pennsylvania. We've had immigration and customs enforcement officials who have been shot. I saw something really quick on the news
Yep.
today about something else happening to another individual. And, we have the New Mexico Republican Party's headquarters set on fire. And the shooter that attacked recently the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Mhm.
It's not just one party, it's not just one group, that this has become an epidemic that is tearing down the foundations of what society was all supposed to be about. And, Ray, I will say it doesn't matter whether you liked the views expressed by the people in Minnesota or the people or the Charlie Kirk. The reality is that everybody has the right to free speech. Everybody has the right to be respected in their speech. You don't have to agree with it, but there is no justification. There is no rationalization for any of this to be taken place. When you have a society that doesn't even have breaking news of a terrible situation at a high school in Colorado, which is getting thrown to the side
Mhm.
because the focus is on an event of political violence that's taking place in Utah. I fear for our country during this time. So we record this episode just really saddened, shocked, and I dare say that we're angered because we're losing the opportunity for there to be just political discourse in American society. And when that happens, when you lose that freedom, the direction that a country goes is scary.
Yeah, I was talking to someone yesterday about that very topic, and Charlie Kirk was known for going outside on college campuses. He was doing that there in Utah, and I wonder how much what happened with Charlie Kirk there in that open air setting is going to impact politicians' willingness to go and campaign in open air settings. You saw last year with then former president, Republican nominee Donald Trump. He was shot, literally shot. Thankfully, he survived it, but I mean, he was literally shot in Butler, Pennsylvania, at an open air event. And you've got to wonder, Chris, how are these events going to impact the willingness of lawmakers, whether in Congress, the House, or presidents or presidential candidates, to get out there in open spaces and engage with the voters?
Yes, and I think through this idea of political campaigning, we are getting ready to step into off races for elected officials. We're going to be having some Senate races and Republican races, and it won't be very long, and people will be talking about the presidential campaigns that are upcoming. And
Mhm.
I think it's going to change the way that people do campaign. And How comfortable do you feel going to a political rally knowing that there is such a heavy armed presence, not just for the actual speaker, but for the people that are actually going into the event? That's the other thing we have to consider is uh, it is a horrific action that just took place this week with Charlie Kirk. But think about all those young people that were there
Yeah.
who could have been caught in the fire. I mean, it is a tragedy that happened and how other lives were not impacted, through that. I know the details will come out a little bit later, but I think about innocent bystanders. I think about these young people who simply wanted to go and on both sides. I'll be honest with you. I didn't really know Charlie Kirk. Didn't never listen to any of his things. I just be honest. I've heard the name, but didn't know anything about him. But what I have found since then is that it was a combination of people who loved him and people who didn't like him who would attend his rallies. So it wasn't just a pro him rally, it was multiple people who would attend. And he would have that discourse with them and he would have those conversations with people who disagreed with him. And now we're at this point where you can't even trust that you can do that. And I'm scared about that. Because this is taking us back to the 1960s and 1970s. When you think about it, you had a president, John F. Kennedy, who was assassinated. Well, we had President Trump, who has had two assassination attempts that were put on him. I think about a civil rights leader, Martin Luther King Jr., who was assassinated. Well, we have a political leader. I don't know what you could call Charlie Kirk, but you could call him a civil action leader, if you will, who's been assassinated. You had presidential candidates, Robert Kennedy and George Wallace, who had assassination attempts against them. Only Wallace was the one that survived. So you start comparing the 60s and 70s, and that was a very difficult year for our nation. And you look at kind of where we are in just 2025 alone, it shows that how are we really going to be able to get to know candidates if we don't have that honest question and answer session? Because candidates are afraid to go, but also the public is afraid to attend these events.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at the crowds that would go see Charlie Kirk and the crowd there at the Utah University the other day, like you said, there were people there who liked him, there were people who there who didn't like him. But when that gunshot hit, everybody was most everybody was horrified. I saw one person in the crowd standing up cheering, which that raises a lot of questions in my mind. But I mean, just about someone's humanity in that case. But you've got people on both sides of the aisle who are horrified at what happened to Charlie Kirk. They were there enjoying the debate, enjoying going back and forth with Kirk and with others. And like you said, are people going to be as willing to participate in those events now that they know, okay, this could happen. It could happen again, and I had forgotten about this until this week. And let me see, I've got it in my notes here, but I had actually forgotten about it. Democrat representative from Arizona in 2011, Gabby Giffords. Remember her, Chris?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
she was the Senator Mark, the astronaut's wife.
Yeah. And she was shot at a campaign event. I think it was more of a just like a stop
It's like a
type
meet
of.
and greet kind of rally.
Yes, yeah. And then of course you got someone Nancy Pelosi's husband in 2022 attacked with a hammer in his home of all things. And then you mentioned earlier the two Minnesota incidents this summer, and it makes me worry about, like you said, Chris, it makes me worry about candidates' willingness to get out and about among the voters. It makes me worry about people's willingness to openly engage in political dialogue. But it also makes me worry about people who may have thought, well, I'm going to run for political office or I'm going to get politically active. Now it's like, no, I don't think I will. I'll go do something else. So it's just another reason we could be losing some good people who could do good things in the world of politics. And heaven knows we need some of those. And I was thinking as you were talking a minute ago, Chris, You go to the White House nowadays and there's barricades and everything around it, and that's the way it has to be. Welcome to the 21st century. But Thomas Jefferson, the second president to inhabit the White House, they say you could walk up to the front door and knock on it, and Jefferson himself would answer the door. And
in his bedroom slippers.
in his bedroom slippers and nightgown, no less. But you see the divide that is happening, necessary because of security measures. But I think that divide, as we see this violence, I think that divide only gets worse.
And people might not like this, but I think so. We go and we start to figure out, okay, why? Why is there so much of this political violence and this horrible rhetoric that is going on? And honestly, the major reason, this is just my opinion, I'm not a social scientist or sociology professor, but what it comes down to is the aspect of social media. That social media has come aboard, and I think the anonymity of social media, in that people can get online and it allows them to speak without personal consequence. There's nothing there for them,
Right.
that they can say all that they want to say. And then what happens is that gets traded to another person, to another person, to another person. And so what you have is that many of these individuals who believe these conspiracy theories and all of these other things is out there because they hold major misbeliefs about the other party's stance, because they're not listening to what the party is saying. They're listening to what social media is saying. And I heard this morning driving in. I think it was the Utah governor who said, listen, there is so much misinformation out there on Twitter that you are believing that is absolutely not true. And he gave one example, and I think he said something like the bullets that were fired from the gun had engravings on them that were linked to, I think, transgender issues or things of that nature. And so somebody or some group or some people on social media was trying to promote a theory as to why this particular individual did something long before they even had the person. Well,
Mhm.
now that has come back, and those people have said, listen, that was inaccurate, that was wrong, made a mistake. Well, add to the fact that I think they pulled in two guys for questioning and had to release them.
Yeah.
And so on social media, those two people who were pulled in have had their names, they've had their reputations destroyed because they started pushing that theory that, oh, they got that guy and they got the cart behind but in front of the horse. And so I think social media, I think the 24-hour news network is really causing this. Gosh, Ray, we go back to sensationalism. We go back to William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer and the first idea of the newspaper, because I need to get the first bite. I need to get
Yeah.
the first feed. And it is pushing people to to talk about things that they just don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And here we are, our podcast is history you didn't know, but should. And I think that before individuals start with the hate mongering, that it needs to be, making sure that you understand the other person's side
Mhm.
before you start sharing, responding, or acting.
Yeah, I had on my own Facebook feed, I had to say something like that to somebody. Yeah, it's like we can't be a part of spreading misinformation just simply because it may, agree with your political position or what have you. You got to slow down, take time to research and do your homework first. But that poor gentleman, the guy who was taken away right after the shooting happened. I don't know why they arrested him. I don't know what triggered that. But you talk about 24-hour media and social media, and I agree with that 150%. But three things that I was thinking about as you were talking, Chris. One was a number of years ago. I think it was CNN. I want to say it was. It could have been another network. Correct me if I'm wrong. Um, but there was it may have been the guys in DC who were shooting people out of the back of their car.
The
Remember that?
sniper, the DC
The
snipers.
DC snipers. And there, and they had like closed in on one of them in a boat in somebody's backyard or something. And again, I don't remember what network it was, but
No, you're talking, let's go back because that, I think you're talking about the Boston bomber, right? You're talking about the Boston Marathon bomber because he was the one in the boat that
maybe
was,
maybe it was that one.
yeah,
But
that was
the
the Boston
network,
bomber.
the guys on the air or the reporters got ahead of the story and started reporting stuff that wasn't accurate, and then had to sort of backtrack real quick and then move on. Of course, we all saw during the 2024 presidential campaign, the this idea that people, immigrants in a certain area were eating pets, eating dogs and cats. And, that riles people up and that gets people angry, that kind of conspiracy theory. And then, of course, was it Pizzagate? This guy went up to Washington, D.C., I think he was from North Carolina, of all places, and shot up a pizza joint because he thought there was some pedophile ring or something being run out of it. And come to find out it was just a pizza joint. So all these things are examples of how social media, 24-hour news, all this just sensationalizing everything and conspiracy theories flying all over the place. It shows it can have very dangerous and real world consequences.
And I'll add one thing to that. And because I think it is important to do also, in that we have individuals who are social media and they're saying things, and these are ordinary, just citizens.
Mm-hmm.
But then let's go to, you mentioned CNN and talking about how they had to backtrack. And
Right.
I think it was MSNBC that as the events unfolded the other day in the Charlie Kirk thing, you had political commentators, people that are on the national airwave who are basically inflaming the rhetoric. And I'm not going to use his exact words because I don't remember them, don't know them. But in other words, he kind of saw it coming. He got
Yeah.
what he deserved in some kind of aspect because that person commentating didn't like his views.
Yep.
And so spouting stuff like that just incites
Yeah.
divisiveness. And that's where the news is no longer the news, because it used to be that the news was a place where you went for information. You did not go for opinion. You did not go for editorializing. You went just to get the news. And by that person, who I think MSNBC had to fire
They
because of
did.
his comments,
They did.
but it's too late because once he has said something, it is a 30-second clip that will then live in infamy on social media that gets used as propaganda. It gets used as, this or that, whatever it might be. And so therefore, we run into a problem of that information getting used for the wrong reason.
Yeah, and you mentioned MSNBC, and that guy was fired, but there was a guy on Fox News basically later that evening saying something about war, and this is war or something to that effect. And so unfortunately, as everybody's sort of talking about, you know, how to figure out how to get over this and how to get over the violence and get past it and stop this rhetoric and stuff. There were people within minutes or hours of this event who were out there just stirring the pot as fast as they could.
Yeah.
It's
So
tragic.
I fear that if we do not get a handle on this, and I don't know how you get a handle on it because politics has become so divisive. Even, I mean, let's give this. I saw just a brief clip or something where they were trying to have a moment of silence in the House of Representatives for this tragedy.
Mhm.
And people within the House, these own politicians, started arguing at each other and started blaming one another for
Mhm.
the event. So if our political leaders are doing it,
Mhm.
then how do you stop it? And I'm not I'm not trying to be Johnny Downpour or Susie Raindrops, but I'm trying to say that we've got, as Americans, we've got to start standing up and saying this is not right. We
Mhm.
have lost. I teach a course in critical thinking, and I'm always teaching my students the importance of using logic and staying away from assumptions
Mhm.
and making sure that your argument is based off of fact. And when you go to counter someone's argument, it's based off of fact. You don't just argue just to argue. That's not what the actual definition of an argument is. It is an opportunity to come together and to engage in discussion about a particular topic. And so, in my mind, it's important for us to get back to that, to go back to the days of Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, who taught us how to reason and to reason well. And I know that it's not going to be my senator and my representative that is going to lead that charge, but it's got to be me, and it's got to be you, and it's got to be the people that are listening to this podcast who are going to say, I might not always agree with what Ray has to say, but I'm always going to be willing to listen to what Ray has to say, and I'm going to walk away respecting him and his viewpoint and have good discussions about that. This used to be just a thing about religion, and now it has become a thing about anything in society. People are willing to kill over music. They're willing to kill over dress. It's time that we take a pause and we go back to the idea of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah, they'll also
Using
kill over the
reason.
color of the carpet in the church house too, interestingly
Oh
enough.
yes.
I mean,
Oh yeah.
that's it is, and I think I was reading when preparing for this episode how many people were saying, um, well, the majority of society is much more moderate, and I had someone tell me that earlier this week that the majority of people, the silent majority, whoever they um, are more moderate and not as radical. And I'm looking at the situation on the House floor the other day, and I think, but these are the people we're electing to represent us. These are the people we're electing to run our government. And in some ways, whether we like it or not, what happened in the House of Representatives is a reflection of the United States itself. I mean, you had the moment of silence, and then you have chaos that followed it. And, you know, it was just like I said earlier about you were talking about MSNBC, I mentioned Fox, within just a few hours of this tragedy, people arguing and bickering again. So, Chris, before we leave, I did my homework, Chris. Aren't you proud of me?
I am.
And
What are you about to share?
I asked,
Lightning news.
yeah, I asked if he was proud of me, and I stopped to wait for his response. You notice that?
I did. I'm always proud of you there. Just share with us the exciting things that are about to happen.
Oh, no, no, this is history.
Oh, is it deal with Ghost?
No, well, it might, but anyway, I put together a list of presidential assassinations and presidential close calls. So it's close to hauntings. Um, Abraham Lincoln, April 14, 1865. James Garfield, July 2nd, 8. Don't go to sleep on me.
No, I hope our listeners are writing down these dates.
They better.
They will be quizzed later.
There will be not a quiz, an
Re-
exam. There will be an exam.
Remember, history is not about dates.
I'll leave the dates out though. You got Abraham Lincoln, James Garfield, William McKinley, John Kennedy. Everybody knows most of those, maybe with the exception of William McKinley, But as far as close calls, you had Andrew Jackson, Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, Harry Truman, two with Gerald Ford, two with Donald Trump, two with George W. Bush, and at least one with Ronald Reagan. And those are just the ones I could find very quick. So political violence is a major problem in the United States. And like I said at the opening of the episode, it's been a part of the American story since the beginning. It's tragic. And Chris, you would hope here being, what are we, a quarter of a way through the 21st century? You would hope we would be past that. But apparently we're not.
But just because it's been part of American history
Right.
does not mean that it has to continue to be part of American
Right.
history. And with all of the latest that we have, it's got to stop. It is worse now because we have more digital means, we have more access, we have more communication tools, and information spreads. And The other thing that we haven't talked about with this, and we don't need to talk about it, but we just have to put it at the forefront of our minds. I go back, you mentioned Abraham Lincoln, a house divided falls.
Yep.
And so if we think about this, Russia, China, North Korea, um, Iran, all these countries are sitting back and they're watching. They're watching this uh, great country, this country that is of democracy, this country that is of all these freedoms, and they are watching us crumble from within. And if we're not careful, then the ideas that and the values that we try to push onto other nations will fall to deaf ears because they will say, well, you're killing one another and you're refusing to listen to each other's views. So why should we want to do the same? So those are just my thoughts. Those are your thoughts.
Very,
But I do
very well
hope
said,
that,
sir.
but I do hope that our individuals, our listeners, will have their own thoughts. And that as we go through, this is not about Charlie Kirk. This is not about a particular individual. This is about a nation that is in mourning over our ideas and our actions and the way that we are talking to one another. And so I encourage all of us to take a stand for what we believe in, but may that belief focus on respect of one another and their beliefs. We appreciate you allowing us to maybe have a rant or to maybe stand on a soapbox today, but just to share the state of history, because it is history that we do know, and it is history we should know, and it is history that we should be wanting to change. And so we encourage you to go and to pass this podcast along to others, share with them, and we invite you to journey with us and to share your comments, your thoughts, your reasons about this podcast and about all of the others that we have. You can find us on all the major streaming platforms, including YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and on and on. We look forward to hearing from you. Share with us your thoughts. But above all, go out and make a difference this day and be respectful, love one another, and encourage others to do the same. Until we meet again, I'm Chris.
And I'm Ray.
He's Ray. We hope you have a great day.